The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
From Mallory Square in Key West to the Governor's Mansion in Tallahassee and all points beyond, you're listening to the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com, your source for all things related to the craft beer community in the Sunshine State. And now your host, Dave Butler.
Here we go yet again. It's time for another Florida Beer Podcast powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com. This is Dave, your host and author, and that was a weird intro. What can I say? Kind of a fun episode today. If you've been to this brewery, you'll know just how much of a crazy, zany, visual beast this place is. If you haven't, first of all, not shocked. And second of all, you should probably get to West Palm Beach as soon as you can to go visit them. But before we get started, make sure to follow us on the socials. We are at Florida Beer Blog on Instagram and Twitter, at FL Beer Blog on Facebook. We are available via email at floridabeerblog@gmail.com. Internet, FloridaBeerBlog.com is obviously the main site. FloridaBeerPodcast.com is where you can hear all of these awesome episodes. And when you get on to FloridaBeerPodcast.com, you will realize very quickly that we are a proud member of the Florida Podcast Network, which is an awesome selection of all these amazing, very cool, awesome podcasts. So yeah, definitely check them out. Make sure to tell your friends what's going on. We do publish this on a weekly basis. We definitely encourage you to like us and rate us and subscribe on the podcasting app of your choice. Put us on social media. Hey, we just heard this awesome podcast about the blah, 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 blah. And it really does help get the word out. So thank you so much. Doesn't cost anything. It's free. Don't you love free? I love free. And this is free. If you have been along US 1, otherwise known as Dixie Highway, traveling south out of West Palm Beach, eventually you'll come across a very quick drive-by of sort of a peach building on your right. And you'll see big green neon sign that says Dixie Grill and Brewery. That is where we are heading today. If you have not been in West Palm for a very long time, you may have known it as the Dixie Grill and Bar. And that's how it was when I first knew about them. And then over time, they added a small brewery to the back where unfortunately you won't be able to go. But that is going to be changing since they have actually purchased the space next door. And they are going to be expanding into a much bigger brewing facility over there. If you have ever been inside, you will know that pictures do not do this justice. Every single inch of the tables and the walls and the ceiling, everything is covered in memorabilia and posters and artwork. It just goes on and on and on. And I did not realize this until speaking to the brewer / co-owner, Jason, that the walls actually have layers. There is strata above you, and you can see what the interest in collecting was as you kind of look through the layers. But we're going to be speaking to Jason Matta, and we're going to be speaking to his wife, Rachel Matta, about this particular brew pub. And Rachel's actually the interesting one because it was her father, Richard, and his twin brother, Jay, that created the Dixie Grill and Bar back in 2004. So I'm going to be speaking to both of them about basically the history of the Preefer brothers, Richard and Jay, and creating this particular place, eventually transferring the ownership over to Rachel and Jason, their love of craft beer, why they decided to make it into a brewery or / brew pub, and what the future is going to look like. So enjoy. It's a fantastic place. Definitely very kid-friendly, great food, great beers, and you'll learn a little bit more about them. So enjoy. This story does not start with the two of you. This story starts with your father and your uncle a long time ago, because this was not their first establishment by any stretch of the imagination. If you could take us a little bit down memory lane to some of the places in the area that they had constructed that kind of brings us to the building that we are currently sitting in.
So both my father and uncle, they were identical mirror twins and pretty much did everything hand in hand with each other. And my father went into restaurants while Jay did more so the law practice. And their very first restaurant that I'm aware of is a bit of nostalgia that used to be in Lantana, Florida. And it is a bit of a nod, or I should say Dixie is a bit of a nod to a bit of nostalgia, given it had a lot of the similar decor with things hanging from the wall. The dining room was on a carousel base, so it would rotate around every few minutes. What can I say? Then from there, they had the Bowery, which a lot of people remember was out in Okeechobee, and well, I should say on Okeechobee in West Palm. And it was a lot of bands and concerts type style. And eventually here, there, wherever, and they ended up with the Ale House on Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard, which was there for decades. And that's mainly where I grew up. They had the Hut downtown, and this was one of their last places, a little place on Dixie Highway. And they started this in 2004. Actually, our build out was during those hurricanes that were all back to back to back to back.
Yeah, I remember that was Charlie and can't remember who the other ones were.
Gene might have been one of them.
Yes.
But yeah, and even Jason has a better memory than I do about that, because apparently this window wasn't even here and it had to be created because we brought in the banquette. And also back then it had decor, but apparently not nearly as much. And he remembers my father saying he would never hang anything from the ceiling. If you ask my father, he said he never said such things.
And Jason, we were talking a little bit about the build out because this had, I guess, a colorful history before anybody involved with you and your family walked into the place.
So the structure of the building was so different. The bar actually was wrap around. The entrance was where our kitchen door is now. Like she had briefly mentioned, the window that we're sitting next to currently actually was created as a window because we had to get the banquette for the back wall in. So when they were reconstructing the wall, they decided to just leave a window in place. The dollar from one of the previous businesses, the first dollar, was actually donated to us by one of the previous family members that their family owned it. So that's actually hanging on the wall over on the other side, which is interesting as well.
Interesting.
Definitely. And it's been everything from piano bar. It was a gay bar at one point. It's been so many different, I believe it originally was a gas. Actually, the urinal in the men's room has the original tile from when the building was first built. So we didn't tile over that portion to kind of leave a little nod to the history of the building there.
Interesting. I guess saying that was a gas station, I can see the size of the facility. That makes a lot more sense. And you were even saying that the outside patio, not that we can go out there today. I mean, we could, but
yeah,
no. That used to be the parking lot, or it used to be a parking lot.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very limited with space, so we decided to kind of change the idea. What was difficult initially was that since it had been primarily a bar, there was no kitchen prior to this establishment. We had to change the mindset, which is a funny deal with the neon sign outside. It was actually Dixie Bar and Grill for a long time.
And I remember that, I
think,
think,
as Bar and Grill. However, they decided to rework the neon at a pretty high cost to change it to Grill and Bar to make sure that some of the customers driving down Dixie Highway would understand it's a restaurant now as opposed to just a bar. So it was funny to kind of change that mindset for our potential customers and people in the area.
Interesting. And obviously we'll get to the manufacturing a little bit later on in the interview. So when you came into the place, when you finally built it out, clearly it had a liquor license already, or at least to serve. Did you have to restart that? And then what additional steps did it take to bring in the food license as well?
So we were very fortunate. We actually have a 4COP license here. And as opposed to many of the breweries in Palm Beach County, when we started brewing operations, we did a brew pub license, which is a child license on our distribution license or our liquor license. So luckily enough, the building did have the liquor license attached, which was very helpful. Getting the food and getting our kitchen set up was definitely a big challenge for us. I mean, if you take a look back there, it is about the size of a food truck. So there are many evenings where we're doing hundreds of covers, and these guys just do such an amazing job pushing as much food, with balancing the quality and speediness of service and getting stuff out of the window. It still blows my mind each day. Some of the, evenings that we have that are super busy, it really does take a toll on the building. But the challenges that we faced early on, there weren't much in the way of brew pubs. So we kind of used Brewsy's ideas and bouncing ideas off of, some of the people in the area of kind of how did you go about getting this license, and that helped us along the way. But it was definitely unique challenges initially.
Interesting. And, especially with such a small kitchen, you have a varied menu. There's a good amount there. Was it easy to create a menu like this? And was it easy to develop the kitchen to what it needs to be because of what your father and uncle had already done with the previous restaurants, especially with the ale house?
I think no is the general answer to that. It was not easy to do any of it. Coming from the ale house background or sports bars in general, more of a fry it till it floats and you have the bulk. Here we can't buy anything in bulk. And in around, I would say, 2011, 2012, when we really started to make the transition towards craft beer and not just having some of the macros on 6 lines. And now we have 31 taps. To make that transition, we started making more of our products here in house. So now we make our dressings, anything you get here that's fried. We beer batter and fry it. We don't bring in any frozen fried products. We make all of besides the dressings, we hand patty our burgers. That's why you can get our chicken tenders for kids. You can get them grilled or fried because we do all of it. So for the space that's back there, it's quite a challenge, but these guys can do it like the back of their hand, which I give them all the credit in the world. It would take me forever. Nobody would get their food.
That's amazing. And obviously with the kinds of places that you mentioned this building was before, there's a very specific menu of beer that you sort of expect those to have on tap. But you also mentioned that, eventually over time, you started to kind of go away from that and head over to the craft beer side of things. My first question concerning that is, why did you decide to make that decision? We are pointing towards Jason.
Yeah.
So we actually took a trip out to Colorado, a ski trip, and we had some family friends out there. We decided to spend our first evening out there with them. The father is a fantastic chef. Went over, brought a bottle of wine. I was, at the time, still an avid natural light. So he had New Belgium's Fat Tire. And he said, have you had this before? Not familiar with it. The lighter, the better for me. So I decided to give it a try. Had it with dinner, had 2 or 3 of them. Really enjoyed it. Cold weather at the time. That beer was a little more biscuity and a little more malt based to it. And I found it to be delicious. Rest of the time we were there, kind of experimented with beer, got back here to Florida and went to the grocery store and attempted to buy some Fat Tire at the time.
Yeah, best of luck with that.
Yeah, New Belgium, no distribution here, which kind of led me into home brewing. But I started taking a look at some product around the area, started asking our beer distributors. At the time, we're only using 2, and said, hey, I'm looking for this product. Is there any way you can get it for me? Obviously not. So do you have anything similar to it? So we were able to start experimenting with craft beer. So brought in a line or 2. I believe one of the first beers that we served locally was actually Tequesta Brewing's Chancer. Brought that product in along with Gnarly Barley, a couple of other products from Cigar City, products within the state. And we started noticing customers really enjoying those choices.
And that's actually a good question because I was going to ask, because when you've got a dive bar that has a macro heavy menu, the clientele base is very different from a craft beer bar where they want to make sure that the beer has never left the county so much so. Was that a difficult transition to make with the clientele, or did the clientele basically stay the same, just becoming a little bit more appreciative? I got you stumped. Yay.
I would say we had a mix. We had a very good mix because when having some of that macro on draft, there were people that would sit at the bar, have a few, and they would watch sport games and all. And more people that were coming in that were enjoying their meals and wanting to try something different. We always offer a sample of something that's on draft for the most part to make people aware of well, if you liked this style, maybe you'll like this. And it has worked out very well that people try all kinds of things. We have the most eclectic selection on the 30 drafts that we can, I think. And people really can have fun with it. And we offer a flight too for the ones who really just can't decide on the one that they want, which is also fun because if we don't happen to make it ourselves, then there's a variety of others. And we love supporting other local Florida breweries. And that gives us the ability to do so. Plus, we keep the macros in bottles for the diehards just in case.
That's funny.
We definitely noticed it was difficult in making that transition. And not only was it difficult to explain to people, it was sort of an educational process as well. So it was letting people understand when they heard craft beer, all they thought was dark Guinness, something like that. So letting people understand that there are so many different styles that are similar to what they currently drink. So we had little cheat sheets for bartenders and stuff like that. Like they drink this, let them try a sample of this product, so on and so forth. That helped, I think, kind of change the mindset. We had a customer in particular tell us that if we ever took Bud Light off draft, that they were never coming back, and they continued to come back because, we still had it available in the bottle, still do now. But we really like to rotate our selection. We don't really keep too much on draft of the same exact product all the time. It really does help to educate the customer base, but we realized in doing so, and I think which was the transition in food as well, kind of led into it. We noticed people were coming in for our great beer selection, but our food wasn't matching. So you'd ask somebody, you want to take a look at a food menu? Like, no, I just had dinner, just wanted to stop by for a couple of beers, or I'm meeting some friends for dinner somewhere else. And that's what really made us take a look at the kitchen and say, you know what? Like our beer menu is fantastic, but our food wasn't matching at the time. So we started doing more research and trying to figure out how to bring a chef in, redo the menu, and really kind of creates the environment that we currently have.
Awesome. And I guess the other question concerning a tap list of 31 beers, especially beers that are local, especially beers where you are starting to attract more of an aficionado crowd, is storage has to be kind of difficult for all of that. I would assume a lot of those would be sixtels and not full kegs. But how do you manage to keep, for those of you not watching, which is all of you, there's currently a 3-year-old crawling across Jason's lap over to Rachel, because that's what happens when we have kids.
So
as my daughter gives me beautiful side eye. So obviously, because obviously you need to rotate the stock. You want to make sure that the stuff is fresh.
Yeah.
But you don't have a ton of storage like Ale House.
Yes, not at all. So definitely one of our challenges is space in this restaurant. As I said, we've got a kitchen the size of a food truck, and we get fresh product in every probably 2 to 3 days. I mean, we get produce in every day. So when I started ordering more beers to fill up our tap lines, kitchen's staring at me like, I can't get to our produce, or I can't have our guys do prep. You've got kegs stacked throughout the cooler. So we decided to actually take over. There's an in-law suite for the house just behind our building here. So we decided to take over the in-law suite, and I got licensed for an off-premise storage. And we actually have coolers built into the in-law suite now, and where we store our beer. And we try to keep inventory really tight. And so we don't have a ton of product back there, but we do have deliveries probably that happen 5 days a week when it comes to beer, utilizing all different distributors to get unique products in that you won't find at most bars.
Okay, but now we come to the fateful decision and the day, not just to buy and sell, but to make and sell. Who started that conversation? Because I'm sure that was somebody had that decision. I don't know if it went to your dad first or if your dad was the one who had the idea. It seems like this seems like it would be a story.
Well, the fun part about Dad is that despite he's been in all these bars and restaurants all these years, he doesn't drink. If I've ever seen him have a drink, maybe once in a blue moon, it was a Kahlua and cream, heavy on the cream. And it's because he said he got too sick off Colt 45s at high school graduation. So you're talking 60s. But
wow,
he can appreciate, he can appreciate the ideas and new transitions and what becomes popular. And that's where Jason comes in for sure. He can definitely elaborate more because the build out process, I leave that to them.
So kind of back to that New Belgium story and getting Fat Tire, when I realized you couldn't get it here, what I decided to try to undertake was creating it myself. So went to the old BX Beer Depot and decided to buy an extract kit to start brewing. Got a recipe for a clone of Fat Tire and started making some tweaks. Then graduated to, partial mash, then to an all grain system. It was all supposed to be a hobby. At the time we were still chasing beers and such a great community of, kind of having connects in different areas of the country and getting product that's only available regionally. We were really into just chasing beer at the time, but that evolved into me brewing styles. Actually, one of the best beers I think we ever brewed at home, honestly, was a Zombie Dust clone that Rachel picked out and brewed, which was absolutely fantastic. My first venture into using Citra at the time, and turned out fantastic. But we had the idea to go ahead and start a brewery on a 1-barrel system. We finally got build out done, licensed, and we kind of shoehorned it into a space in the back that the city allowed us to have.
Yeah, I was going to say, you have no space. No. How did you even decide to figure out, here's where I can put something?
Well, we were initially approved to build out where our 2 rear parking spaces are. We were planning on building that out towards the alleyway with a small area just behind it as a buffer for the alleyway. When the city came by at one point, they said, hey, we can't have you build out that far. We can only give you to this mark. And at that point, we were already going through the licensing process, and we said, okay, well, if that's all you're going to give us, we'll have to try to figure out how to do it. Weren't very many manufacturers because we were kind of in between that homebrew size and a production size. So at a 1-barrel, there weren't too many options at the time. So we were trying to get custom barrels done, and fermentation products were difficult to come by. And luckily enough, we found some product. We were able to put it all in place, and quickly realized that the 1-barrel wasn't going to hold us over. Our customers really enjoyed the product and really enjoyed getting something made here. And then, of course, evolved now into what we currently have, which is a 2-barrel system. And it is really shoehorned in there. There is barely any room. Sometimes have to walk sort of sideways in order to get by some of the tanks or anything that's in back. But yeah, really fun use of the space.
That's funny. And I remember coming, when you first started making them, and it was basically either Hoplamatic Immunity was on tap or it was Ambrosius Amber. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's grown to where I think you have about 7 or 8 of your beers on tap right now.
Currently, we have just around that. What we started noticing was on the 1-barrel system, our production would take about 3 to 4 weeks from start to finish. And of course, at the end of that, we would get about a little over 5 sixtels worth of product. So by the time we made it, we were immediately having to fill the tank right back up with the same product. So having the ability to rotate that product was very difficult for us. Led us to increasing our cellar size, increasing our brew house size as well. Still doing our best to keep up with demand and keep up with product, but still the rotation on our product has to essentially, as soon as the tank is empty, obviously we've got to fill it right back up in order to feed our customers, which is great because that's now leading us to our expansion next door.
I was going to ask, because I think the last time that I spoke to your wife, we had I think the both of you had shown us that you had the space next door. It was sort of storage right now, but as we drove by, it is clearly under construction right now. So that is going to be you.
Yes, that's correct.
What's going to be going over there?
Well, most people, when they walk into a brewery, like to see the tanks, like to see where the beer is actually produced. So we don't have any showcase brewery like that. Currently, next door, we're going to be moving into a 7-barrel brew house, going to have 60 barrels worth of cellar currently planned, as opposed to the 19, which we currently have. So we'll be going just over triple in size. We're going to have a tasting room there with a bar dedicated to the beer, likely going to maybe do some appetizers or small plates next door, obviously service through here, but we'll see what the kitchen can handle. And then we're also doing a retro arcade bar as well. So we've been collecting large cabinet games from 70s, 80s era, 90s as well for quite a while. So yeah, we are just about done with demo. We're looking to get plumbing and HVAC done as soon as possible, but we're hoping to be fully operational within the next 6 to 8 months or so.
That's awesome. And since it is a separate address, will you be able to take beers from there, bring them over to the restaurant where we are right now? Do they still have to go through the 3-tiered system, even though it's technically the same owners in the same building, just right next door? What does that look like?
So what we're actually doing is combining the buildings. Even though there is a small space, we're going to have an awning and a walkway, which you can access to our patio. So we're going to be operating under the same licensing that we are currently, and we're going to be able to brew beer over there, serve the same product that we're serving over here, be able to keep up with demand, and then also serve the tasting room as well. So luckily enough, since we are attached, it is all going to become the same business. We will be operating under a different name next door for the arcade bar, but we will be able to provide product without having to go through the 3-tier system for both locations.
Okay. And for the foreseeable future, for right now, as you're starting to build this up, as we're taking a look at the taps, and you've got a lot of beers that are yours, but obviously you still curated an expert list of additional beers to sort of bring in and fill that tap list out. In terms of making those beers, or I'm sorry, in terms of selecting the beers that are on there, what are you trying to go for? What are you really looking at? Because it is all craft. It is mostly Florida. There are a couple of notable exceptions that are on there, as I see the Lagunitas. Just fine. How is that decision sort of made in terms of what the customers want, what the business has, what you can get access to, and so on?
Well, I love the idea of supporting local. And I think at this point, while, like Jason said, we chased some great beers. We spent our first wedding anniversary in California to get Pliny the Younger and do a bunch of breweries that were out there. But at this point, I feel like you should be able to go down the street, support your local brand, and they can make just as fantastic as a product as the places that were chased for a long time. During the pandemic, I really made a conscientious push, while I always did bring in a lot of Florida breweries, to definitely make sure that other Florida breweries had some love in order to get through the times that we were all kind of facing. And while you do see Lagunitas, Bell's, some diehards that are regional or outside of our area, I think it's important to see just a variety. And people do a whole bunch of different styles really well, and people don't necessarily know that. I think I always give the same example. Civil makes a great stout, and people know them for their IPAs, but there are a bunch of places that you can get a fantastic sour from this one, or an amber from that one, or a Pilsner from this one, and they're all fantastic. So I think it's important to just give that variety and option in places people haven't heard of, and they could drive there,
Awesome. When you do give build out to the new tap room, are you thinking of eventually all the guest taps go away and this will all just be you?
Well, I think here, I don't want to change the idea of this. It's become sort of a neighborhood staple. And what I'd like to do is actually create an environment in which it remains family friendly. We do have on the weekends, we want to turn the jukebox up a little more. And sometimes, our bar customers want to have a little more fun. We want to make sure that it still remains family friendly. So next door, we're going to focus, I think, a little bit more so on just the beer, on maybe staying open a little bit later and, being a little bit louder over there. So here can remain the fun family neighborhood place. We always want to support the local products, and we always want to support the, breweries within the state and have some interesting product that comes in. Because as much as I really enjoy making a product, I really enjoy sampling other products as well. So bringing in beer from around the country is just a lot of fun to kind of still chase down some kegs. Rachel does a really great job at going through all of the lists with a great eye, and it takes her a while. Sometimes I give her a hard time, but there are times that she brings a product in, or I go to the store and I see a can that looks interesting. She's like, we have that on tap right now, right? It's just like, I didn't even realize how quickly stuff rotates in and out of here. It's difficult to keep up with the beer list that she does such a great job of creating.
Awesome. So it seems like you've got a lot of good stuff coming down the pipeline, which is awesome. But I will leave you with one last question, only because this is what I remember from our last visit. Whatever happened to the one-eyed cat?
Drooly he had 2 eyes, but pretty much no teeth.
Okay.
So Drooly was definitely my stray cat I took care of for years, and I boarded him for 2 different hurricanes so that he wasn't in the alley. Thank goodness to a local vet who understood the cause. He lives a very, very comfy, happy life now inside, apparently. On our block, we share space with another animal rescue foundation. And one of their volunteers took him while I was in and out for maternity leave, essentially. And they ended up bringing him home. And now he has a girlfriend and he's living the lap of luxury, which I would have loved to provide him. But he really enjoyed being in the brewery and had wanted nothing to do with being inside before that.
That's funny. All right. Thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
So there you go. The audio is good. It's a good interview, but literally nothing will prepare you for going there other than just going there. It is absolutely amazing and a place that I really do prefer to go to when I am in the area. Next week starts our 2-part series with somebody in the West Palm Beach brewing community that I have been wanting to interview for a very long time. He was one of the people on my get list, the people that I've always wanted to have on the show as guests. I finally got him, and I don't think that 2 episodes would be anywhere near enough to hear all the stories that he has. As for who that is, you'll just have to wait and find out. And definitely like and subscribe to us on the podcasting app of your choice. That way you will find out when that episode gets released. Or obviously you can follow us on social media at Florida Beer Blog on Instagram and Twitter, at FL Beer Blog on Facebook. You'll get the information there as well. Our intro announcer is Jeff Brozovich. Field producer is Steve Pekala. Executive producer for the Florida Podcast Network and Grand High Poobah is Jemmy Legagneur. This is Dave, your host and author. Thank you so much for listening in. We'll see you next week. Drink Florida Craft.